What if I told you that in 1981, a quiet musician pulled off something no one in music history had ever done before? In a single night, he won Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best New Artist at the Grammys, 4 of the biggest awards in music, all at once. His name was Christopher Cross. For a moment, it looked like he would rule pop music for the next decade, but only a few years later, the same industry that crowned him had completely erased him. Radio stopped playing his songs. MTV would not show his face.
The wind is right, you can find the joy of innocence again.
Record labels stopped returning his calls. The question is simple. How does someone go from the biggest night in Grammy history to playing state fairs just a few years later? To understand how it happened, you have to go back long before the awards, back to San Antonio, Texas in the early 1970s. In the early 1970s, Christopher Cross was still Christopher Geppard. He was the son of a car salesman and a store clerk. His family lived in a small house near Lackland Air Force Base, where fighter jets rattled the windows almost every day. Music was not a family business, but when Chris was 15, his parents scraped together about $300 to buy him a Gibson acoustic guitar. They could not afford to pay it all at once, so they paid $20 every month until it was finally theirs. That guitar became everything. By the time Chris turned 20, he was playing in a cover band called Flash. They performed wherever they could find a stage. Small bars, honky-tonks, bowling alley lounges where the crowd cared more about beer than music. The pay was terrible. Some nights the band earned $40 each. Other nights they were paid in free drinks. Sometimes they drove 200 miles to a show that barely covered the cost of gas. But something about Chris was different. While the other musicians focused on copying popular songs, Chris heard full arrangements in his head. Strings, harmonies, layered melodies that sounded more like studio recordings than bar music. So between sets, he started writing his own songs. He scribbled lyrics on cocktail napkins and recorded rough demos on cheap cassette tapes. The other members of Flash were not impressed. "Nobody comes to a bar to hear original songs," one of them told him. "They want the hits." But Chris kept writing anyway. During long drives between San Antonio and Houston, he started shaping a gentle melody about escape, a calm place far away from noisy bars and endless highways. That melody would eventually become Sailing. At first it was just another experiment, but something strange started happening during their shows. People in the crowd began requesting the song. "Play that Sailing one again." For a bar band in Texas, that was unusual. Original songs rarely got that kind of attention, but the requests kept coming. Chris did not know it yet, but those small moments were the beginning of something huge. Because somewhere in Los Angeles, a demo tape was slowly making its way through the music industry, and the man who finally heard it was about to change Christopher Cross's life forever. For months, Christopher Cross's demo tape floated through Los Angeles like background noise. A producer listened for 30 seconds and passed. Another said the songs were nice, but too soft. The late 1970s music scene was loud and aggressive. Punk bands were smashing guitars. Disco ruled the dance floor. Nobody was searching for calm, polished songs from an unknown musician in Texas. But then, the tape reached producer Michael Omardian. Omardian had worked with serious talent, including Steely Dan. He understood arrangements, and the moment he heard the demo, he noticed something unusual. The song sounded finished. Even on a rough tape, you could hear complex chords, layered harmonies, and melodies that felt effortless. He picked up the phone. "Can you be in Los Angeles next week?" Chris had about $400 to his name. The plane ticket cost $350. That left him $50 to survive in California. He bought the ticket anyway. When he arrived in Los Angeles in 1979, there was no glamorous welcome, no limousine, no luxury studio waiting. Chris spent his first nights sleeping on the floor of a small recording studio. But Omardian believed in the music enough to take a risk. He convinced Warner Brothers Records to fund a recording session. The label agreed to a modest budget of about $200,000. That sounded like a lot of money until you realized studio time in Los Angeles cost roughly $500 an hour. The clock was always ticking. Luckily, Chris had been preparing for years. Every arrangement was already mapped out in his head. Every harmony, every instrument. When the musicians arrived, He already knew exactly what the song should sound like. One of the first tracks they recorded was Ride Like the Wind. The song had a driving rhythm and featured backing vocals from Michael McDonald of the Doobie Brothers. His distinctive voice gave the song extra power. Then came Chris recorded the vocal in only a few takes. The engineer later said it was one of the cleanest performances he had ever captured. At the time, nobody in the studio believed they were making a classic record. They were simply trying to finish before the budget disappeared. The album was completed in about 6 weeks. When Warner Brothers executives first listened to the finished record, the reaction was lukewarm. The music sounded smooth and sophisticated, but it did not match the aggressive trends dominating radio. The label planned a small release and minimal promotion. Then something unexpected happened. In early 1980, a radio DJ in Orlando started playing Ride Like the Wind. Within days, the station was receiving hundreds of calls asking to hear the song again. 300 requests in a single day. Other stations noticed. Soon, the track began spreading across the country. Warner Brothers rushed to press more records. The first 50,000 copies sold out in about 10 days. The next 100,000 disappeared even faster. By April 1980, Ride Like the Wind had entered the Billboard Hot 100 and climbed all the way to number 2.
I'm on the run, no time to sleep. I've got to ride.
It was blocked from the top spot by Call Me from Blondie. Still, number 2 meant Christopher Cross was suddenly earning more money than he had ever imagined. But wait, because the next single was about to change everything. The second single from the album was Sailing. Warner Brothers was not even sure it should be released. The song was quiet, slow, and almost dreamy. At a time when radio loved loud rock and dance music, Sailing felt completely different. But when it finally hit radio in the summer of 1980, something incredible happened. Listeners fell in love with it. By August, Sailing climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It stayed there for a week and quickly became one of the most recognizable songs on the radio. You could hear it everywhere: shopping malls, car radios, living rooms across America. The album, titled Christopher Cross, exploded in popularity. Eventually, it sold more than 4 million copies in the United States alone. That meant quadruple platinum status. For Warner Brothers, it generated more than $40 million in revenue. Christopher Cross went from sleeping on studio floors to staying in luxury hotels almost overnight. But wait, it gets crazier. In early 1981, the Grammy nominations arrived. The album was nominated in 5 different categories at the Grammy Awards. For a brand new artist, that was extremely rare. Yet Chris was not celebrating. Instead, he was sitting alone in a hotel room in New York, overwhelmed with anxiety. He was suddenly competing against some of the biggest names in music, including Pink Floyd, whose album The Wall had become one of the most famous records of the decade. The pressure was crushing. Warner Brothers had already spent nearly $2 million promoting the album. Now they expected a superstar. They wanted tours, interviews, television appearances, and they wanted the next album immediately. They also wanted something else. They wanted him to look like a star. Chris was about 5'8". He was balding. He had gained weight during years of living on cheap bar food. To the record label, that was a problem. "You don't look like a rock star," one executive told him directly. Stylists were hired. Trainers were brought in. Media coaches started preparing him for television interviews. Chris went along with it, but something felt strange. It was as if the industry that loved his music was trying to redesign who he was. Then came February 25th, 1981, the night of the Grammy Awards. When they announced Best New Artist, Christopher Cross heard his name. He walked to the stage and accepted his first Grammy. Moments later, they announced Record of the Year. The winner was Sailing. Then came Song of the Year. Once again, Sailing. The biggest award of the night, Album of the Year. The envelope opened. Christopher Cross. The audience jumped to its feet. No artist had ever won all 4 major categories in a single ceremony. It was one of the most dominant victories in Grammy history. But here is the strange part. Standing on that stage, holding those awards, Chris was not celebrating. He was terrified, because he suddenly understood something. From that moment on, every album he released would be compared to this night. and the music world was about to change in a way that would make that almost impossible. Just 6 months later, a new television channel launched. Its name was MTV, and for Christopher Cross, it would change everything. When MTV launched in August 1981, it quietly rewrote the rules of the music industry. Before MTV, success mostly depended on radio. If a song sounded good, stations played it. Listeners never cared what the artist looked like. MTV changed that overnight. Now every hit needed a face, a style, an image that worked on television. Music videos became mini-movies, and the artists inside them suddenly mattered as much as the songs. And that is where Christopher Cross ran into a serious problem. He did not look like the new generation of pop stars. Chris was in his early 30s, balding, and heavier than most performers on television. He looked like an ordinary guy, the kind of person you might see working at an office or teaching at a school. Meanwhile, MTV was filling its screen with artists who looked larger than life. Michael Jackson released Billie Jean, and later, the groundbreaking Thriller video, which looked more like a short film than a music clip. Madonna was building an image that shocked parents and fascinated teenagers. Prince appeared on television dressed in purple, playing guitar like a rock legend. Compared to that, Christopher Cross looked ordinary, and on MTV, ordinary was a problem. Warner Brothers tried to solve it by hiding him in his own videos. Instead of focusing on Chris, the early video for Sailing showed ocean waves and sailing footage. Abstract images replaced the performer. Eventually, they showed him on screen. The reaction was brutal. Some viewers laughed, others were confused. They had heard the voice on the radio for months, but the face behind it did not match what they imagined. Even radio personalities joined the jokes. Shock jock Howard Stern mocked his appearance on air, turning Christopher Cross into an easy punchline. But wait, while the industry was beginning to doubt him, something incredible happened again. In 1981, film director Steve Gordon asked Cross to help write the theme song for a new comedy called Arthur, starring Dudley Moore. Cross teamed up with legendary songwriter Burt Bacharach and lyricist Carol Bayer Sager. The result was Arthur's theme, Best That You Can Do. The song became another massive hit. It climbed to #1 on the Billboard chart and stayed there for 3 weeks. In 1982, it even won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Think about that for a moment. Christopher Cross now had 5 Grammys and an Oscar. On paper, his career looked unstoppable, but behind the scenes, the pressure was beginning to crack his life apart. Warner Brothers wanted a new album immediately. They expected another smash hit, another multi-million seller. The problem was simple. Nobody could agree on what that album should sound like. Some executives wanted another smooth record like the first one. Others demanded something modern that worked better on MTV. Chris was trapped between two worlds, and the album he eventually released would show just how quickly the music industry could turn on its newest star. Christopher Cross spent almost 2 years working on his second album. The pressure was enormous. Warner Brothers expected another blockbuster, something that could repeat the success of Sailing and Ride Like the Wind. The label poured millions into the project. Producers were hired, stylists worked on his image. Video directors were brought in to make sure the music could survive in the new MTV era. The album was called Another Page, and it arrived in early 1983.
The front page story is our love is through.
The lead single, All Right, performed fairly well. It reached #12 on the Billboard Hot 100. For most artists, that would have been a strong hit, but Christopher Cross was not being compared to other artists. He was being compared to his own past. His first album had sold more than 4 million copies. Another Page struggled to reach 800,000. On paper, that was still respectable, but inside Warner Brothers, it looked like a failure. The real damage showed up on tour. Just 2 years earlier, Cross had been playing arenas packed with thousands of fans. By 1983, those crowds were shrinking. Promoters quietly moved shows into smaller theaters. Some concerts were canceled entirely because ticket sales were too weak, and everyone in the industry knew the reason: MTV. By the early 1980s, if your video did not play on MTV, your song barely existed. The network's audience was mostly teenagers and young adults, and executives had a clear formula. Artists had to look exciting, stylish, larger than life. Christopher Cross did not fit that formula. His label tried everything. They hired directors who had worked with Duran Duran. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on music videos. One video for Think of Laura used fashion models and exotic locations. While keeping Cross on screen for only a few seconds. MTV played it 3 times. 3. Meanwhile, videos like Hungry Like the Wolf were playing dozens of times every week. Behind the scenes, one anonymous MTV programmer told a magazine something brutally honest. Their viewers, he said, wanted artists they either wanted to be or wanted to date. Christopher Cross was neither. When Cross read that quote, it crushed him. Nothing about his music had changed. His voice was still the same. His songwriting was still the same. But suddenly, the industry no longer cared, and the financial consequences arrived quickly. By 1984, Cross had earned around $3 million from his debut album, and another $1 million from Arthur's theme, Best That You Can Do. But after taxes, management fees, agents, and lawyers, only about half remained. He had bought a house in Austin for roughly $400,000 and spent freely, believing the money would keep coming. Then the income stopped. Within a few years, his annual earnings dropped below $200,000. He still owed the government hundreds of thousands in taxes. His manager had taken a percentage of gross income rather than profit, meaning Cross owed money even when he barely earned any. He had to sell his house and move into a small apartment. But wait, because the worst part was still coming. In 1985, he released his 3rd album, Every Turn of the World. The label spent around $2 million trying to modernize his sound with synthesizers and new producers. The album peaked at number 127. It sold fewer than 200,000 copies. Warner Brothers lost nearly $2 million, and soon after that, the label that once called him their golden boy quietly dropped him. Just 5 years after sweeping the Grammys, Christopher Cross was unsigned, nearly broke, and almost forgotten. By 1986, the fall was complete. Just 5 years earlier, Christopher Cross had been the biggest name at the Grammy Awards. Now, he did not even have a record label. The announcement that Warner Brothers Records was dropping him did not come from a phone call. It came from a short paragraph in a trade magazine. No meeting, no explanation, just silence. The speed of the collapse was shocking. In a few short years, Cross had gone from selling millions of records to struggling to pay basic bills. The emotional damage was even worse. His drinking, which had started as a way to calm his nerves before shows, spiraled out of control. Wine turned into vodka. By 1987, he was drinking almost every day. His weight climbed past 300 pounds. He rarely left his apartment in Austin because strangers still recognized him. Sometimes, the recognition was cruel. One afternoon in a grocery store, someone shouted, "Hey, it's the yacht rock guy. What happened? Did your boat sink?" Chris abandoned his cart and walked out. The music industry had already moved on. Labels were signing younger artists with flashy images for television. Whenever Cross tried to pitch new songs, the answer was always polite but firm. Great music, but nobody is buying Christopher Cross albums anymore. He was only in his mid-30s, yet the industry treated him like a relic from another era. By 1988, he was playing small festivals and county fairs. At one show in Iowa, he was 3rd on the bill, performing before a cover band that played songs by Journey. Halfway through Sailing, the power went out. While technicians worked on the equipment, people in the crowd joked about his weight. Some wandered away to buy drinks. When the lights came back on, half the audience was gone. Chris finished the set anyway. Backstage, he collapsed and cried. But wait, that night, something important happened. His keyboard player sat beside him and said something simple: "You are still alive." A lot of musicians from our era cannot say that. It was true. The music world was full of artists destroyed by fame, addiction, or tragedy. Chris realized he still had a choice. He could keep destroying himself, or he could survive. In 1989, he checked into a rehabilitation center in Arizona. The first attempt did not work. The second attempt did not work either. But the third time, it stuck. Sobriety did not bring fame back, but it gave him something more important: stability. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, he kept touring. County fairs, casinos, corporate events. Sometimes cruise ships where the audience remembered the songs but barely remembered the man singing them. It was not glamorous, but the music never disappeared. Sailing, Ride Like the Wind, Arthur's Theme, Best That You Can Do, and Think of Laura kept appearing in movies, television shows, and playlists. Younger listeners slowly discovered the songs again. Ironically, the style critics once mocked as yacht rock started becoming popular again. And decades after the industry tried to erase him, something surprising happened. The music outlived the moment that created it. Today, Christopher Cross is still touring in his 70s. His voice is rougher, and the venues are smaller. But whenever he starts playing, audiences still sing every word. The Grammys, the record deals, and the industry hype all faded away, but the songs remained. And sometimes that is the only victory that actually matters.